Hello, Internet. So this is part one of two of my conversation with Michelle Chmielewski, who is one of my favorite bloggers, actually, and she's a community manager over at Seismic. So she's from my hometown of Utica, New York, and since has moved over to Paris. So it's really cool to talk to her. In part one, we talk a little bit about kind of how she got from Utica to Paris, and also what the differences are between the ways people use social media in Europe versus the States. In part two, we talk a little bit about her blogging, how she found her niche, and how she grew an audience. And she's had a couple of really awesome things hit for her in the past couple of weeks. So great conversation in part two, but hope you enjoy this, and thanks to Michelle for taking the time.
American. I learned French the first time I went to France actually as an exchange student when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with Rotary International as a high school student, and I was a French high school student for a year. So that's how I really learned French, because I had studied it in high school, but you never really learn a language until you live there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did with them when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back to the U.S. and started school at the University of Pittsburgh, then went back to France for an internship, then Brazil for a year, then back to Paris that time for an internship. Then came back, finished school, and was still working for Sant'Ezio. And then Sant'Ezio hired me to come on full-time as a community manager. So that's how I got to move to Paris.
Awesome. So you had to take pretty much a good year. Was a year plus your high school experience enough to really pick up the language?
Yeah, I would say to really, really learn a language, you should live there for a year, because then you can learn all the slang, you can learn really the culture. And the thing with Rotary that I stress to everybody to do it if they have the opportunity, if they have young kids that are going to be high school age, to do Rotary, because really you just pay for your plane ticket and then they put you in a high school and you just have a year to learn the culture and the language and live with different host families and love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I would recommend it to anyone.
I love Paris to begin with. I took French all through high school, but I've gone back a few times, and I'm hoping to get back there this year. We'll see. But absolutely love the city. So I was just really curious as to how you made that transition. So it all really started with Rotary, right? Rotary.
Yeah.
So then how did you hook up?
Paris.
Oh, okay. Well, right. And then how did you hook up with Sant'Ezio? Am I saying that right? Sant'Ezio?
Yeah. Actually, I was just looking afterwards. I was back in Pittsburgh, and I was just looking for a way to get back to France, and I really wanted to go to Paris. So I was studying marketing and anthropology. So I just looked for a marketing internship in Paris, and I happened to find them because I found out they were a multilingual, multicultural company from the start. And that's somebody that they were looking for. And so that's what really drew me to them. Because, as you know, in American universities, you can pay to do an internship. Right. And I thought, okay, why do I want to pay to do an internship? First of all, I already speak French. Mm-hmm. And I can find my own internship and get paid, because that didn't make sense to me.
Do you get a sense that there's a lot of those out there in Europe or in other countries, internship opportunities for American students or professionals?
I think you have to look, but I would say right now is definitely the time. For example, one thing that I see in Paris, and I'm sure it's similar in other countries too, is they're looking for a way to have their company be international, because the market is global now, and so they want their company to be global. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they need someone that speaks English fluently. So really, there are a lot of job opportunities in Paris for people that are native English speakers.
Awesome. That's very cool. And then because Sant'Ezio it's a software as a service company, right?
Software plus service, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So then, what then prevented them from having you be a community manager for them from Pittsburgh or from Utica, or what's up with that?
That's how it was actually for 8 months. When I was finishing my school, I was in Pittsburgh, and so I was a community manager from Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, with the time difference, with 6 hours of time difference, you lose a day sometimes on some things, and they really wanted somebody in their local office. And that's the big advantage of being in Paris, is that I have so many opportunities because I'm a native English speaker, but I'm there. They can have a meeting with me in person. They can see who I am. Mm-hmm. And that's what companies want. They want somebody that's right there that they can call, that is in their office.
Cool.
Particularly for community management, where it's something that really impacts the brand in real time. And because it affects their clients, because we're talking with the customers, we're talking with people for partnerships, anything to do with the brand. And so they want to be able to have their hand on that in real time.
So talk a little bit about community management was for you at Synthesio. You know, was it just monitoring blogs, Facebook, Twitter? Was it more support on site, or what was that like, or you know, for in your role?
Sure. I think my role was a little bit particular because our clients are other businesses, so it was a B2B community management type role. And so it's a little bit different, I think, than somebody that's a B2C community manager, where it's more customer service, answering questions, things like that. Synthesio doesn't have or didn't have a ton of comments online when I started. So it started out monitoring, seeing what people were saying about the industry, about our competitors, about the space, identifying influential people and getting in touch with them and building relationships with them, becoming interested in their blogs. And so it was any type of outreach online and offline. So that was, you know, being online and talking with people on Twitter, on Facebook, on their blogs and forums, whatever. But then also going to events either in the US or in Paris, and also doing any type of PR work. I was also in charge of that. So reaching out to journalists, because for me, it was the same type of deal. You know, they're people I want to be in touch with, and I'm
Right.
interested in what they're doing, because if I'm interested in what they're doing, then they'll be interested in what I'm doing.
Cool. And so then you're moving to Seismic, right?
Yes.
And so how did that come about? Were you actively kind of or can't you say that you were actively looking?
No, I can talk about it because I already posted on my blog too anyways, because I'm overly honest just from the start, and it was kind of something I had toned down. Sorry. But no, actually I wasn't even looking because I like Synthesio. I love the people that work there, and I was super happy working for them. It was just, I had met Loïc Lemur and Cédric Georgie, that's now the European marketing or European director. And I knew that if I ever had a chance to work with them, I would jump at it. And so I wasn't looking, but they came and talked with me and said, you know, we'd really like you to work with us. So when they asked me, I said yes.
Where did you meet them? At Le Web?
Yeah, I started talking with Loïc last year. I was testing out Seismic for my iPhone because I had tested TweetDeck, which I was originally using on my computer. And then I tested it on my iPhone, and I didn't really like it. And then I tested Seismic, and I tweeted something like, wow, Seismic is great. And Loïc said, great, if you want to talk about it in France, you know, if you want to be our evangelist, go ahead. And I said, well, only if you invite me to Le Web. But it was a total joke, but actually he did invite me to Le Web, so it worked out.
Wow.
So go to the show, you have to ask or you won't get anything.
That's awesome.
So afterwards I started talking with him and chatting with him, and could see from right off the start that he was a great entrepreneur with great ideas. So really interesting.
Very cool. It seems like a great company. I mean, I try to follow what they're doing, but you know, I've used TweetDeck, I've used Seismic, I've used Hootsuite, and I don't know. It's like I will agree that TweetDeck it sucks for any iOS device. Like it's still really bad. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I think you have a really interesting perspective on, you know, being a cross-cultural person on social media. And so how much of your day, or whether it's personal interaction or business interaction, is French, and how much of it is in the U.S., right? So like, do you notice that there's a big distinction between the way people use social in Europe versus U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that in the U.S., I would say there's a greater adoption rate in the U.S., so people are more on Twitter, etc. But it's different. For example, there are people on France that are on Twitter, and that's why I started using it particularly for business. But the people that are on it, it's a lot more professional, I would say, in France, actually. So it's more people that are already in marketing, or that are journalists or politicians or celebrities that are on Twitter in France. And there's also, I would say, there's also kind of a cultural gap in the acceptance of social media. And by that, I mean, I feel like people in France sometimes are a lot more reticent to use social media because they're one concern is privacy. So they're scared about putting different information out there and unsure about what the benefits are, unsure about, you know, what am I going to get out of this when I'm putting so much information out there. And so it's something, I mean, I think that for me, social media is things that translate from real life. So, for example, that's something even I saw waiting in the airport line, where I know, you know, they have those full body scanners now where they can see underneath all your clothes.
Right.
And in France, it was a huge scandal. And so now when you go to the airport in France, you can ask to be put through that, but otherwise you just go through the regular one and they pat you down. Whereas in the US, I was waiting and you have to ask to be put through the old scanner.
Right,
Otherwise,
right.
they'll put you through the new one. And I actually asked the lady behind me who was American, I said, so what do you think about that? And she's about the new scanner. And she said, whatever. It's what they have to do. So it just kind of shows, like Americans are kind of over it. We kind of accept that we don't have any privacy anymore. Mm-hmm. So, we're just accepting the good things from social media without really necessarily thinking about the negative. Not to say always, not to generalize, because obviously there are exceptions.
Cool.
But, I think for me that's a huge difference between the two countries.
Cool.